Welcome, listeners, to this deep dive.
Hello, everyone.
Today, we're going to unpack a market that, well, it might seem pretty small on the surface, maybe even niche.
But it's really anything but, isn't it?
Exactly. We are diving into the surprisingly vibrant world of the global hair accessories market.
Mm-hmm.
And our insights today, they're pulled straight from a detailed market research report by Cognitive Market Research. Gives us a great lens on this.
Yeah, some really solid data to work with.
So our mission is basically to pull out the most important nuggets, the key insights from all this data. We want to show you the surprising growth, the regional trends. It's a truly booming industry.
It really is. You might be surprised.
Get ready to be, well, really well informed about something you might never have thought about in this much detail.
Okay, let's dive in.
Right, let's unpack this, starting with some, honestly, staggering global figures.
Yeah, the top line numbers are quite something.
So this report, it shows the overall market valuation for hair accessories was already nearly $19 billion. That was back in 2021.
18.8 billion, to be precise. Already a huge number.
And it's not just staying there. It's projected to grow to over $25 billion by 2025.
Okay.
And then it really takes off. The projection is more than $45 billion by 2033.
Wow, 45 billion. That's more than double the 2021 figure.
Exactly. And that reflects a strong compound annual growth rate, the CAGR of about 7.6% over that whole period.
And what's really fascinating here, I think, is how such an everyday kind of simple category like hair accessories can represent such immense and crucially consistent growth.
Right.
These aren't just numbers floating around. They really reflect, significant shifts in consumer spending, fashion trends constantly evolving.
And personal style self-expression.
Exactly, that growing emphasis worldwide. Mm-hmm. It just shows us why even these small, often affordable items can have really massive economic implications.
Absolutely. Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting, I think, as we start looking at the regions.
Right, the geographic breakdown.
Let's start with the most dynamic one identified in the report, Asia-Pacific or APAC.
Always a key region for growth these days.
Definitely. So APAC started at roughly, $7.4 billion in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
It's aiming for over $10 billion by 2025 and projected to hit nearly $19 billion by 2033.
Almost 19 billion, just for APAC.
Yeah. Growing at an impressive annual rate, too, over 8.2% CAGR.
That's faster than the global average.
It is. And within APAC, China is, well, it's leading the way. Its market is set to more than double, from just over $2 billion in 2021 to a projected $5.2 billion by 2033. That's growing at almost 7.8% annually.
Still very strong growth for such a large base.
And Japan's also a major player here, expanding from around $1.5 billion to nearly $3.7 billion. Similar growth rate, actually.
Right. But while China and Japan are obviously huge, you really have to look at India. The report highlights truly exceptional growth there.
Oh, yeah. Tell us about India.
Well, it's projected to more than double its market, too, from about $1.1 billion in 2021 to almost $3 billion by 2033. And look at this CAGR, almost 9% average annual growth.
9%. That's incredible.
It really is. And this surge in India, it's likely not just about the huge population, right? It's probably fueled by that rapidly expanding middle class.
Makes sense.
The explosion of e-commerce, making all sorts of new styles accessible, even outside the big cities.
Good point. And maybe cultural factors, too.
Absolutely. Think about the strong influence of Bollywood local fashion trends. Hair accessories are often a key part of looks, both every day and, for festivals and weddings.
That makes a lot of sense. And, get this, the report points out that the rest of APAC region, so excluding China, Japan, India, etc.
Right, the other countries combined.
That category actually showed the fastest growth globally. It nearly tripled in size.
Globally? Wow.
Yeah, from around $830 million to almost $2.5 billion. And the annual growth rate, over 10%.
10% CAGR, that's phenomenal.
It means that market in that rest of category is basically doubling every 7 years or so. That's incredibly fast for any industry.
Absolutely. It points to broad-based growth across Southeast Asia and other parts of the region.
And even Singapore is mentioned for its impressive momentum, projected to nearly triple its market value as well.
So APAC is clearly a powerhouse.
Undeniably. Okay, let's jump across the globe now. South America. Another region showing pretty significant momentum in hair accessories.
Okay, South America. What are the numbers telling us there?
Well, the overall market is quite substantial. It started just under $1.3 billion back in 2021, and it's poised to reach almost $3.5 billion by 2033. That's an annual growth rate of about 8.7%.
So also growing faster than the global average.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And looking closer, Argentina is flagged as a real standout there.
Oh, yeah.
This is projected to more than triple its market value over this period.
Triple, wow.
Yeah. What's fascinating is how Argentina is leading the charge with an annual growth rate over 9.2%.
9.2, that's exceptional. Any thoughts on why Argentina specifically?
Well, the report doesn't specify, but you could speculate, right? Maybe a vibrant youth culture there, increasing access to global fashion trends via social media.
Or perhaps strong local brands really capturing the market, connecting with consumers. Could be a mix of factors.
Exactly. And it's not just Argentina. The rest of South America category also shows strong growth, moving from about $500 million to over $1.4 billion, also growing at more than 9% annually.
So really strong growth across the board there, it seems. What about Brazil? It's usually a huge market.
Good question. Yes, Brazil is definitely a major player, accounts for a significant share, and it's also on track to nearly triple its size. The CAGR is slightly lower than Argentina or the rest of, but still very strong at 8.3%.
Okay, so South America is definitely another hotspot for growth.
For sure. Now let's shift our focus to North America. Still a very substantial, more established market, obviously.
Right, mature markets. How are they faring?
Well, the report details North America's market was valued at about $5.5 billion in 2021.
A big chunk of the global total already.
Definitely. And it's projected to reach over $12.5 billion by 2033. So still more than doubling?
And the growth rate?
The CAGR is about 7.1%. Solid, though not quite as high as APAC or South America.
Understandable for a more mature market. How does it break down between the U.S. and Canada?
The U.S. obviously held the largest share, its market growing from around $4.2 billion to nearly $9.6 billion.
Okay.
But interestingly, Canada actually showed a higher regional growth rate, over 8.2% THER for Canada.
Oh, interesting. So Canada's market is growing faster proportionally.
Seems so. More than doubling its market size from about $650 million to over $1.6 billion.
You know, this raises an important question, doesn't it? How do these already established mature markets like the U.S. and Canada, how do they keep achieving such strong growth?
That's a great point. What do you think?
Well, it's often not just about new consumers entering the market, like in some emerging economies. It might be more about trends, right? Like fashion cycles.
Exactly. Think about the resurgence of 90s fashion recently. That brought back scrunchies, claw clips, big sellers.
True. I see them everywhere.
Or maybe a push towards more premium accessories. Or sustainable options, people paying a bit more.
Good point. Or just variety, people owning more types for different occasions or outfits.
Yeah, all of that. It suggests a shift in how consumers view hair accessories. Not just functional, but really integrated into their daily routines and fashion statements.
Makes sense. Okay, moving over to Europe now. Similar story in some ways. Established market, steady growth.
Let's see, what do the numbers say?
Europe's market size was about $3.5 billion in 2021, projected to reach over $8.1 billion by 2033.
Okay, so also more than doubling.
Right. And the CGR is very similar to North America, actually, about 7%.
So solid, consistent growth there, too. Any standouts within Europe?
Well, France shows pretty robust growth, nearly 7.8% annually. It's set to more than double its market value from around $480 million to over $1.1 billion.
France and fashion, not too surprising, perhaps. True. But what also stands out, similar to APAC and South America, is the rest of Europe category.
The other countries again?
Yeah. That group actually posted the region's highest growth rate, over 8.5% annually.
Higher than France. Interesting.
Yep. Projected to grow from about $830 million to over $2.1 billion. So significant growth coming from outside the biggest economies, too.
It is interesting, though, to contrast this with some countries that show somewhat lower growth rates within Europe.
Like who?
Well, the report mentions, for example, Sweden at around 5.3% CAGR, and Denmark even lower at about 4.3%.
Still growing, but definitely slower.
Right. And this variation within established markets like Europe really highlights, diverse consumer preferences, maybe different economic conditions playing out.
Or maybe different fashion cycles hitting harder in some places.
Could be. Perhaps some countries are more influenced by fast fashion trends driving accessory purchases, while others might lean towards more classic minimalist styles, which could mean buying fewer items.
Yeah, lots of potential factors. Okay, nearly done with our world tour. Let's bring in the Middle East and Africa.
Right, the MEA region, often smaller markets currently, but with potential.
Exactly. The report notes the Middle East market growing from nearly $700 million in 2021.
Okay.
Projected to reach about $1.3 billion by 2033. That's growing at nearly 6% annually.
So a bit slower than other regions, but still nearly doubling over the period.
Right. And Saudi Arabia is mentioned as the largest market within the Middle East, growing from about $260 million to almost $500 million.
Makes sense. And Africa?
Africa's market was smaller, around $420 million in 2021, but it's projected to increase to just over $1 billion by 2033.
Crossing the billion-dollar mark.
Yeah, at a CAGR of about 6.4%. So growing a bit faster than the Middle East, actually.
Interesting. And any specific dynamics within Africa?
Well, similar to other regions, the rest of Africa segment outside maybe South Africa, although it wasn't specified, achieved the highest regional growth rate.
Okay, what was that rate?
Over 6.7% annually, more than doubling its market size, from about $200 million to nearly $500 million.
Right. And, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it really shows how even regions with, let's say, smaller current valuations are still very much part of this expanding global trend.
Yeah, the demand seems widespread.
Definitely indicates widespread demand. And think about the specific contexts. In places like the Middle East, hair accessories can also hold significant cultural and aesthetic importance, right? That might influence consumption patterns differently than in, say, Western markets.
Good point. Different styles, different occasions, maybe.
And in Africa, you've got factors like rapid urbanization, that growing youth population. Those are powerful engines for demand across many consumer goods, including accessories.
Absolutely. So after that whirlwind tour, what does this all mean for you, our listener?
Yeah, let's try and synthesize this a bit.
Well, I think the main takeaway is that what might seem like a pretty niche market, hair accessories, right, is actually a massive multi-billion-dollar global industry.
Billions and billions.
And it's experiencing really impressive, consistent growth across almost every single region of the world. It's quite remarkable when you actually dig into these numbers.
It really is. And I think this deep dive reinforces how critical it is to look beyond those surface perceptions, to really understand market dynamics.
Definitely.
It shows how these seemingly small product categories can have truly vast economic implications. They reflect broader consumer behavior's wider trends.
It ties right back to what we try to do here, doesn't it?
Exactly. It connects to your journey as a listener of gaining knowledge quickly but thoroughly, revealing those hidden depths in everyday items you might never have really considered before.
So just to recap a few of the most striking details you heard today.
Yeah, hit us with the highlights.
We're talking about a total projected market value of over $45 billion by 2033. Remember, it was under $19 billion just back in 2021.
Huge jump.
Or think about those incredible growth rates we saw in places like the rest of APAC, over 10% annual growth.
Phenomenal.
And Argentina, over 9% annual growth. These aren't just abstract numbers. They tell a real story, right? Story of global demand, evolving styles, probably some clever marketing in there too.
Absolutely. And if we connect this to the bigger picture one last time, think about how consumer habits and cultural trends, even in these seemingly minor product categories like hair accessories, they can serve as really powerful indicators of broader economic shifts, evolving global demographics.
That's a fascinating thought, like little signals of bigger changes.
Exactly. And it raises an important question for you, the listener, maybe. What other everyday items might be hiding equally compelling growth stories?
Good question.
Stories just waiting for you to discover them, perhaps driven by factors we haven't even touched on much, like social media influence, sustainability trends becoming more important, or even just nostalgia that return to past fashions.
It's a great question to leave people with. And it's really why we do what we do here, right, to uncover those stories. So keep your eyes open for those hidden market gems out there, and definitely continue your own deep dives into the fascinating world around you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, everyone.
Have you ever really paused to think about something simple like the hair clip holding back your bangs, or maybe the headband you use? It feels so everyday, right? Just an ordinary item. But what if I told you that little accessory is, well, actually a tiny piece of this huge, complex, and super fast-moving global market? Today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly that, the global hair accessories market. Our mission really is to untangle how things like fashion, self-expression, And these big global market forces all come together in this surprisingly intricate industry. And we're using some really fascinating new research to guide us.
You've absolutely hit on something key there. It might seem trivial, almost insignificant at first glance, but it's actually a remarkably dynamic sector. This market, it isn't just about stuff that works. It's incredibly responsive to cultural shifts, to how we behave as consumers. And as we'll get into, it's becoming this real canvas for personal identity. We're going to uncover the powerful forces driving its growth, some unexpected challenges it faces, and yeah, the hottest trends shaping what you see out there right now. It's almost like a mini version of the whole fashion industry speed up.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Because the thing that's really, really fueling the growth here, and honestly changing how the whole industry works, it's the explosive influence of social media. I mean, think about TikTok, Instagram. Trends don't just sort of bubble up anymore. They go absolutely viral. Like overnight, one day, clock clips are it. The next, maybe it's wide headbands or those pearl pins are just suddenly everywhere.
Viral.
And it's not just consumers buying new stuff, this like hyper-speed trend cycle. It's forcing brands to rethink everything. Their supply chains moving away from seasons to micro trends. It's fundamentally changing product development distribution. Stuff we haven't really seen before on this scale.
That's a really crucial point. That speed, that acceleration, it means styles can peak and crash in like weeks. And that leads us neatly into another big driver. This is whole idea of self-expression and personalization. What's fascinating here, I think, is that people aren't just buying for function anymore. They're buying for identity.
Okay.
Hair accessories offer such an easy, pretty affordable way to make a style statement, right? Especially for Gen Z, younger millennials. There's this huge appetite for mixing, matching looks. You see everything from, subtle gold clips to super playful Y2K stuff.
Lots of throwbacks.
Yeah. And this shift from just utility to identity, it points to a deeper cultural thing where like personal branding trickles down into every tiny purchase. Even a hair clip becomes a statement, part of your curated online look.
That makes sense. That drive for identity, like you said, it almost has to spill over into how people create the looks.
Yeah.
Which brings us to another force, right? The explosion of DIY hairstyling culture.
Oh, absolutely.
YouTube tutorials, Pinterest boards, those Instagram reels.
Yeah.
People feel empowered now. They can braid, twist, accessorize right at home.
Totally accessible.
Exactly. It makes complex styles seem achievable for anyone.
Right.
And that directly fuels demand for the tools, the styling pins, the fancy claws, scrunchies. If you learn the cool braid, you kind of need the right bits to finish it off, don't you?
Precisely. It all connects.
So, okay, while these forces are definitely pushing the market forward with some real energy, every market has its snags, right? Its friction points. And hair accessories, despite being so adaptable, they definitely face some big hurdles. The first major one we're seeing is just market saturation, intense competition. I mean, hair accessories are, relatively speaking, pretty easy and cheap to make. And that has just flooded the market, especially online, with tons of unbranded low-cost items. Yeah. Our research suggests the average profit margin for like a premium hair accessory brand, it's dropped maybe 15% in just the last 3 years, mostly because they're competing directly with these e-commerce sellers who have, minimal overhead. It puts huge pressure on the old retail models.
And that ties straight into that double-edged sword you mentioned earlier, the fast trends. Yes, they drive growth, but that same speed means today's viral hit is tomorrow's, old news.
Exactly. Gone in a flash.
It leads to what some call hyper-obsolescence. It's a huge inventory risk for retailers. And if you connect that to the bigger picture, it really brings up sustainability questions, doesn't it, in these super fast markets? Retailers have this tricky balancing act.
Yeah.
Be trendy, but also manage stock smartly to avoid, huge amounts of waste and dead inventory.
And speaking of sustainability, that's another challenge, right? We can't ignore the growing anti-fast fashion feeling.
Definitely growing.
A lot of environmentally conscious people are starting to look twice at those cheap plastic clips and ties, thinking of the waste. This isn't just a small group anymore. Data suggests, over 60% of Gen Z, they're actively looking for sustainable options.
That's significant.
It really is. And it's pushing a noticeable shift towards better quality or eco-friendly materials, which in turn kind of shrinks the market for the really cheap disposable stuff. It's a genuine change in values, creating a new market dynamic. It's fascinating how it all links up self-expression, growth, these challenges. Which makes me wonder, when we talk about identity and changing values, how does that show up in the actual trends? What's hot right now? The whole Y2K thing coming back is kind of funny for me. I think I might still have some butterfly clips somewhere.
Probably.
But it makes you ask, does that nostalgia well ever run dry? Or is there always a new generation ready to discover it?
That's a great point. And I think you see these trends cycle back, but maybe with a fresh spin. Right now, probably the biggest, most visible trend is exactly that, the return of the 90s and Y2K styles. Butterfly clips, yeah, chunky claw clips, padded headbands. They are absolutely everywhere. Stores, social media feeds.
Can't miss them.
You really can't. This nostalgia thing is genuinely shaping the design language, the colors, the materials, everything. It's capturing a feeling, not just selling an object.
Okay, and alongside that aesthetic trend, what else? Are we seeing shifts in materials or like the philosophy behind the designs? Because if people want more sustainability, that's got to be showing up somewhere concrete, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's another huge development. A real pivot towards sustainable and eco-conscious materials. Brands are getting innovative. They're using things like cellulose acetate, that's a plant-based plastic, basically.
Yeah.
Also, bamboo, recycled metals. It's all aimed directly at shoppers who care about the environment. And it's not niche anymore. In places like Europe, North America, it's fast becoming kind of the baseline expectation, which, raises that important question about how brands adapt. Because using materials like cellulose acetate, it's not always straightforward.
Right, it's probably more complex.
It is. It needs special machinery. Sourcing sustainable bamboo means checking complex supply chains. It often means a higher initial cost compared to, say, standard plastics. So there are hurdles for the brands, too.
That's a really good insight into the practical side of these trends. Okay, and finally, is there anything else really defining what makes a good hair accessory today? Is it still just looks, or is something else coming into play?
There is definitely another dimension emerging, and it's a big one. It's the rise of hair health conscious accessories.
Hair health, okay.
Yeah, these aren't just about style. They're designed specifically to protect your hair. Think about satin scrunchies, right, to stop breakage, or those spiral hair ties that don't pull as much.
Ah, I've seen those.
Or clips designed to minimize snagging and tugging. It's really where hair care meets fashion, and it's genuinely redefining what a good accessory looks like. It's about style and well-being together. So if we kind of pull all this together, what we're seeing is this hair accessories market is this incredibly dynamic mix. You've got viral trends, deep personal expression, and this growing conscious consumerism all swirled together. It's a really clear example of just how quickly market forces and what people want can shift. It proves that even these seemingly small items, well, they play a huge role in our daily lives and in global trends. They reflect and influence bigger shifts in society.
That's incredibly insightful. Really paints a picture. So what does this all mean for, your next hair accessory purchase? Given how fast trends move and this growing focus on sustainability, on hair health, what do you think the next must-have hair accessory will be? And maybe more importantly, what values will it represent? Perhaps it's not just about what looks good anymore, but what feels good and what does good for the planet too. Definitely something to think about next time you're reaching for that clip or tie.